Testing, 1, 2. Testing. Testing, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2. What's that?
News is going to the Bible study this week or next week.
Christian.
Is that Christian?
No. Christian, yeah. If you can keep the door open.
No, it's great. She loves it. It's beautiful. It's very, very old.
Hey, Dad.
Oh, it is. Yes, very good.
What part are you in?
We're very much going west, almost out towards Memphis, but we're in a really nice suburb of Colorado. It's a very pretty area.
Okay, we are live. So, gonna jump in.
Production here tonight. You better not make any mistakes.
Anything that I say, I'm gonna have really far-flung things. I'm gonna be like, my dad taught me this.
Let me get the Matthew Henry commentary out here.
All right, so Ecclesiastes chapter 10. And just as we jump into chapter 10, I also wanted to open up and say, I've been reading Revelation really slow, and I really enjoy it. And I ran by Evan tonight. He was like, what's the next book? And I was like, Revelation. He's like, cool. It's in one sense, it's a hard book, obviously, to penetrate, like, right? Very, very difficult. But I think we're going to jump into that. So that'll be our one. So next week will be the last Ecclesiastes. And then we'll jump into Revelation. And I'm pretty excited for it. So yeah, just wanted to run that by you guys.
Do you
So,
do after summer?
yeah, plan to.
Okay.
Yeah. If there's a bad heat wave, maybe we'll talk. So, but yeah, with that, let's jump in. Ecclesiastes chapter 10. Let's read. Somebody want to read verses 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah. There you go.
As dead flies give perfume a bad smell, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but the heart of the fool to the left. Even as fools walk along the road, they lack sense and show everyone how stupid they are. Is that right?
Yeah. So if anyone wants to jump in there, it's pretty fertile ground right there. He's not pulling any punches at this point.
Well, with that first verse, I mean, what it's saying is like if you're considered a very wise person and you make a terrible mistake, foolish, that's remembered, right?
Yeah.
More than, all of a sudden that takes over.
Yeah.
So that's what it's saying. So to make them like, dead flies putrefy an ointment, that's how bad it is. Or someone wise to mess up and.
Yeah. And it's funny because the whole idea of good reputation, it goes back to an earlier verse that we read in Ecclesiastes about, like, even if you put on a lot of perfume, it's not going to help. But a good reputation is lasting. But a good reputation takes so long to build up. It's relational and it's trust-based, right? And when that's violated, in the sense of there's someone whose life is generally characterized by good things, good behavior, and then there's this this break in the behavior, there's this aberration, and all of a sudden that it's disgusting, it's revolting. And I thought to open up and start out, come on in guys. I thought it'd be fun to start out with, I'll start out with the positive, because I want to talk about a good reputation, and just come on in, your seat's right here. Great to see you guys, nice to meet you.
Skylar.
Skylar, nice to meet you. Christian, you got huge. Yeah. I taught art classes to Christian, and I'd be talking to him like this, and then he got bigger. I was like, Christian. So, good to see you. So we're on Ecclesiastes chapter 10, and we're on verse 1. Thank you so much, Evan. Yeah, no problem. And this whole idea, again, of a good reputation, but I thought I'd start out with the good end of it, a good reputation. So this is my pastor from when I was a boy, because my dad took me to the most wonderful church, and that's Bob Forsyth. And so good reputation, and the good part of the story with this right here, I would go to music lessons over Bob Forsyth's house. I would take violin lessons from Sue, and I would see Bob Forsyth uncensored, uncut, you know what I mean, unplugged. And I'd be in his house, and here's the pastor. And as a 15-year-old kid, you're always like wondering if he's going to slip up and make a mistake or something like that. I spent years over their house every Wednesday. He never, he was the same person that he was on the pulpit, that he was at home, as he was with his wife, as he was with his sons. Who he was who he was through and through. There were no dead flies in his ointment. So Bob Forsyth was a man through and through who, I'm not saying he's perfect, but the consistency of it. But then to take it over, and I thought to myself, don't pull up this guy's picture. But there's just someone in my life who, when I was younger, they led a Bible study. They were someone who, as a younger person, like I looked up to them. And there was this weird, perverse sense of humor. And it was vulgar. It was like pretty vulgar. And I would hear that and I would just be like, you were just up like sharing to a college group. And here you are with like really like crass, like vulgar. And it really bothered me. And the contrast bothered me because I was like, here you are saying things that are so profound. Then here you are over here, just like, and it was the dead flies in the ointment, right? But it's this whole idea of like, whatever, let's just talk about something actually just that takes a while to build up, like a beautiful city, something of that sort. And then you have these come through and just smash, burn, destroy. So to start this chapter out, I actually want to start the chapter out by saying, hey, John. The chapter out by saying, what's so interesting is if you think in terms of chapters, we have to remember that the Bible was originally written mostly without any indication of chapters. But let's go back to the verse before chapter 10 and verse 1. Verse 18, one sinner destroys much good. So the writer of Ecclesiastes, it seems like he's a real thread of continuity with everything he's saying. He's just previously said a little bit of sin. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. Again, think of a city being destroyed by just like 9 or 10 guys ripping through it, just smash, burn everything, right? One sinner destroys much good, and then in the personal sense, you know, one thing is like really revolting, right? In like any one of us. But I think it could also roll over even as well to like endeavors, churches. I read one time, it was a beautiful hymnal. It was a hymn book, and at the back they had all biographies of all the hymn writers. And you're just going through and reading about these powerful lives. And I was so moved by this book. And then I get to one biography, and they just had like the most vulgar jokes. And then I go to 2, 3, 1. I was like, wow, the person who wrote these biographies had a filthy spirit. And it was dead flies in that hymn, like, you know, the biographies at the back. I was like, I don't want anything to do with you. I was really enjoying the hymns, and then you came along with your really crass humor. It was gross. And it just nullified the whole entire thing. And so I read this, and I'm just like so challenged to not be the one sinner that destroys much good, you know? None of us are going to be perfect. I don't mean to make Pastor Bob Forsyth into an idol, but really, we can walk in that constancy. Like God wants us to walk in that. Does anyone want to jump into verse 2? Dad, do you want this Bible?
Go ahead.
Oh, you got it. Yeah, cool.
You asked me that.
Yeah. Cool. So if anyone wants to, if you see anything there in verse 2.
Why is the right always good? Coming from a lefty. I'm a lefty too.
That was funny.
Why though?
God. Yeah.
Right-handed power authority.
Yeah.
Simple. Deep into it, it's so simple.
No, well, it is deep. You're right. It is deep. Like those who will be in judgment, right? The lambs, you know, and the goats, and so there's a lot to. Anytime Scripture has a theme running through it, yeah, we're supposed to dig deep, I think. But if anyone sees anything there, if you want to dig in, and no pressure, just if it.
Well, is the position of honor the left or the right? The position of honor typically,
Right.
it's typically the right.
Geez, Jesus sits at the right hand of the Father.
Jesus, yeah, the right hand of the Father, yeah.
Guess you guys just clarified that.
Well, seeing this whole thing again, like I meant to bring tonight my Bible that I have. It's broken up into, it's the Bible over many books, but it's the Bible without any chapters. It actually helps you to understand everything we've been reading even better. Wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. And it's this whole idea of the inevitability when you start out, like let's take the trunk of a tree. If the trunk of the tree is in the wrong spot, no matter which way it grows, like the trunk is wrong. The branches are going to be wrong when the trunk is wrong. When the trunk is right, then all the offshoots, these branches, they're going to be right. You know what I mean? And it's this whole idea of the wisdom of a man's heart inclines him to the right. You will default towards that if you are walking in wisdom. It's your default. You can't cross over necessarily if you're a fool. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you can't cross over your tendency. And I liken it almost when I read it, I feel like God gave me such a visual mind. It's a bowling ball on a mattress. And then anywhere you put the marble, it's going to roll into it. You know what I mean? It's always, in some, you're going to generally go that way. The admonition then in the next verse says, even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense. And he says to everyone that he is a fool. So what I love about this is we're receiving instruction from the writer of Ecclesiastes that if you, inside of you, if you are inherently foolish, you think that you might be able to cover it up. But people are even going to see walking down the road and just be like, he's a knucklehead. You can't cover it up. You're going to wear it on your sleeve. And I think of just through I think in the art world, I'm exposed to a lot of stuff. And I come across these absolute, shallow, vacuous personalities sometimes. And in that shallow state, they want to utter deep and profound things. But everyone around them, it's like, we know you're not. Do you know what I mean? But they're trying their best to affect some kind of profound wisdom with but even how you walk down the street, so if you on the core of you are so utterly foolish, you're never going to be able to shake that. The cure is not to walk differently, right? The cure is to actually be different. So I think it's really powerful. So if anyone sees anything, again, verses 2 and 3. We jump on to verse 4. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. And is we don't know at the moment if the ruler is in the right or in the wrong. The ruler might genuinely be mad at you because you messed up. Or the ruler just might be capricious and he might be upset with you. But there's one plan of action for either one of those. For calmness will lay great offenses to rest. Pulled up the Hebrew. When you get into the will lay great offenses to rest. Calmness is this word right here. It's marpe, and the definition is healing, cure, health, remedy. So let's reread that, substituting the word calmness with the other words here. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place. For healing, cure, health, remedy will lay great offenses to rest. And part of what I see there is your classic time heals all wounds. Or someone was rash. They instigated the ruler to a place of great anger. But there are other times where someone just maintains their cool, right? the whole idea. And we're about to get into it. So before folly, right? And now we're getting into the rule. Maybe my Bible organizes verse 4 separate from verse 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. These are all. So does someone want to read verse 5, 6? Does someone want to read from 5 all the way through to 11?
I'll read. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. I have seen slaves on horses and princes walking on the ground like slaves. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones is hurt. Charmed, there is no.
Yeah, so if anybody sees anything there, jump in.
I used to have a boss, and like some you're doing the job properly, she would just say, give him time and dig his own. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I was just listening to someone the other day. And what's the fire that burns in so much politics? It doesn't really far left as I am of the far right. Like both extremes are very. And he said resentment. That was the end of Cain's life. And you go back, what we see in front of us, image of a ruler that the Bible, describes simply, and then there's the horrific that just, it's his entire life. He ruled for 30 years, and God. Like you could put 30 years into ruling a country, and God here rulers that really mess it all up. So verse 5, there's an evil I've seen under the sun, as it were an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit. Those are contemporary terms, but they go back in time. The author here knows that it's wrong to give someone a position of power when they're an incompetent buffoon. Just because it's a family member, just because it's just you owe them a favor. There's something wrong against like the fabric of the universe when you take incapable people and you give them positions of responsibility. So there's this really powerful painting. It's got some. What about it? I was like, where this is the raft. Brutal. If you looked at it, he's the only guy who paints bigger than me. If you looked at it, it would go higher than the wall right here and about that wide. It's the biggest, most enormous painting. The Raft of Medusa is a story. And so the French had their aristocracy. Then, right, they had the whole revolution. Then they had Napoleon, and I'm fast forwarding. Now, if you were connected to Napoleon, you got to get sweet positions in Napoleon's government, right? And so he was the hope of France, right? He's conquering on behalf of the French people. So what does Napoleon do? There's a ship, and it's going down the west coast of Africa. It's leaving, I think it left. Who gets the job to run, to be the captain of the ship? The captain who had all the experience and who had, decades behind him of being like the first mate, the second. That's who got the job, right? No. The friend of Napoleon got the job, and he had zero experience in sailing ships. And so he hugged way too close to the west coast of Africa. What happened then was everyone just tear your boat. The underside of your boat, it was gone. So he was, folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in low places. I've seen slaves on horses and princes walking on the ground like slaves. So the people who were competent on the ship were warning this knucklehead captain, saying, you're going to run us aground. There's no way you won't. The ship gets destroyed. What does he do? He, with all the guns, takes a few of the soldiers, takes all the wealthy members of the ship. They all get onto the little lifeboats, and they sail to the mainland. And when they got to the mainland, what do you think they did? It's a terrible story. Well, they had enough, presence there that they were okay, but they never even sent for all the rest of the people that were marooned on the ship. They're just like, it's this whole idea of the impropriety, of fools being in charge. So the Raft of Medusa was the people on the ship banded together any pieces of wood, and for the west coast of Africa, they were starving to death. Most of them died when they found the few that were alive. They went mentally insane. They were just there was cannibalism. And the painter Géricault heard about this, and it was in all the French newspapers. How did we let the ship be destroyed, and how do we betray our own French people who were poor? Their crime was being poor, right? So he gets a big canvas, he paints this canvas all across Europe. It goes up to England, it goes all over the continent, everywhere. And there were fiery speeches given in front of this painting saying, no more fools. Let's read it right here. No more slaves on horses. And the princes, the captains, shouldn't be walking on the ground. We shouldn't have fools running these things just because they're friends with Napoleon. The push was so great that they actually say it was the first codified instance of meritocracy in the West. It's the first time in Western law it became rule. You were going to be a captain, just be friends with Napoleon's family. You had to be capable. It's to the shame of a nation, of a people, if you see the wrong people in power. And he's seeing this, and there's a vexation here. And if the ruler then who has put people in the wrong positions of power, if he thinks that he's going to get out of it through tyranny or that sort, he's sorely mistaken. It says, he who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. Now, I think the verses can be taken in isolation, but really what you see here, he who digs a pit will fall into it, I think it's a thread of thought that when princes set up the structure of their government incorrectly, then the consequence is they maintain power through tyranny. And so here he is, he's digging a pit. Oh, you don't like me? You don't like the way I rule? Well, then, I'm going to the wall. If you want, turn to, I think it's Proverbs 22:8. Maybe one person can turn there. It's just a few pages behind where we are.
22:8?
Yeah, Proverbs 22:8.
Okay. He who sows iniquity will reap sorrow. Anger will fail.
I apologize for that. I wrote down I wrote down the wrong verse number here. If anyone remembers it, my dad remembers verses. But it's the verse, do not move an ancient boundary stone that has been set up by your fathers. I wrote the wrong number right down here. And does anyone know that verse off where it is off the top of it? Well, I remember it, and if anyone remembers it better word for word than me, do not move an ancient boundary stone that was set up by your forefathers. That's the verse I meant to write. It's this whole idea of now, because he's the ruler, and he can do it. How the walls that went all around the fields. My father moved us to Ireland when we were little kids. It was the happiest period of my whole life. And the walls delineated the boundary lines. The neighbors found out that we were moving some of the stones. They weren't like so upset, but they're like, oh, no sheep in the field. But they're like, no. You know? But if you broke that, you were setting up an inherent situation for a feud. And so here's this man, I'll dig the pits and I'll throw you in the breaks through a wall. Well, a serpent's going to come out and bite. I think he who quarries stone is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. I don't think that verse. If the iron is blunt, if the axe is blunt, and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. So I'm just going to muscle it through even more. And it's like, well, no, because as you undertake all these things that you're doing in the kingdom with fools on horses and rich rulers, capable people walking on the ground, as you rule this way, even if you use more force, log, that axe is going to bounce back in your head, because that's what we know happens with dull axes. Keep your blade sharp, right? Because a chainsaw blade, as it goes around, if it gets dull, it gets caught in the wood. And then, I know I'm talking about chainsaws here, but if it gets caught in the wood, it gets jammed, and then the machine rejects it and kicks it out. And so he's trying to use more force. You can try to use more force, but if you go to quarry, your whole take is wrong. Everything about what you're doing is wrong. But wisdom helps one to succeed.
You know, there's the two wisdom of God, which is what is needed, but looking at the wisdom of the world, it's self-centered, selfish,
Yep.
unbalanced, unequal weights, you know, like everything you've been saying. So apart from, you know, the Lord's wisdom,
Yeah.
that's the way the world works.
Yeah, and as an example, to think of like troubles, like he was hiding in caves for so many years. Position with even as badly as he transgressed over and over with like 700 wives, 300 concubines, still he had a hallmark of like he had wisdom enough that the nation was together. But then along comes Rehoboam, right? Have a complaint. Complainers, and he says, my pinky is thicker than my father's thigh. He was just, and Israel splits into two. everything turns into like.
So going back a bit, a ruler angle.
No, it's good.
Rises against you, do not leave your pros, cons, and it's like, I just thought of my wife with that too. She's like, just leave your post, just put your.
Yeah. And you can watch something, a direct parallel, but I've had it in the art world position from people who, like, one he is a dangerous person. Just wasn't there in my power that this person had. I was like, it's a matter. So we're up to verse 11. What I think would be good is if someone, my Bible tethers 11 together with the previous verses, but actually, and I think it does connect, but I think 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 is it's a bundling of a thought. So does someone want to read 11, 12, 13, 14, 15?
The words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness. A fool also multiplies words. No man knows what is to be. Who can tell him what will be after him? The next one.
Yeah.
They do not even know how to go to the city.
Yeah. And jumping also back to verse 11, if the serpent bites before it is charmed, there's no advantage to the charmer. So if you fly very low over verses, it's like, oh, here's the thought. But if you fly higher, choice, because you only have a window of time in dealing with this ruler or other people, but with this ruler who could potentially, turn like that. And so let your words be choice, because the snake could bite before you even have the chance to get the words out. So get in, get there quick, and be deliberate. I don't think the words, so again, I'll go back. If a certain serpent bites before it is charmed, advantage to the words of a wise man's mouth win him favor. But the lips of a fool consume him. Or a ruler, when you go before someone who's capricious in a position of power, your words have to be wise, and they have to be few, and hopefully, and they will win you favor. So here, actually have wisdom, the favor, so to obtain favor in the dealings with other rulers, right? You can't just have someone who's going to rush in. And so we're going to see the fool about to rush in. It says, but the lips of a fool consume him. Ever had an indictment for the age where we're messing up big time? I think unprecedented in the history of humanity. It's like every time I meet someone, I make fun of the art world so much. I think if people from the art world watch these live streams, I'm like, I'm not making fun of all of you. But when I go to the art world, I can't get over how every single time I say hi to someone, they're like, oh, I have a podcast. Oh, I have a podcast. You should listen to my podcast. I'm like, does everyone have a podcast now? And we're multiplying words. And, in the, what does it say in Proverbs that in the abundance of words, there's transgression or something like that?
Multitudes of words.
Yeah.
Multitude of words,
Yeah. And I think to myself, the gym and the TVs are always on. I'm not going to say the name of the specific show, but there's 4 or 5 ladies and they're sitting up there and they're all hashing out what is wrong with America. And I can't even hear them. I just see the attitude and stuff like that. And I'm watching this and I'm like the multitude of your words, none of you have stopped talking, and you do this 5 days a week. 5 days a week, you talk for an hour and you're gonna eventually put your foot in your mouth, and they all do.
Fool one, fool two.
What's that?
Fool one, fool two.
Yeah. And I sit there, and it's on both sides of the aisle, because I'll see over on this side where I'm like, do you really think that you are a repository of enough wisdom that you deserve a time slot every single night from 7 to 8 p.m. and you're just gonna be spouting wisdom endlessly? No. We're living in the age of the excess of words, and 13 through 15, he just attacks it. The beginning of the words of the fool's mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be. And the admonition here is for all of us to pause and say, we don't know what the future holds. None of us do. And here we are, all talking like we have the inside scoop, and we know exactly what China is going to do if we do this, and all this pontificating, and with the fool multiplying words, he has no idea what tomorrow is going to bring. If he did, he'd be really rich on the stock market, and he's not, right? And who can tell him what will be after him? The toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. And what the author is saying here, I believe, is why is it that, earlier we saw, I've seen slaves on horses. And then right here, the toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. The people who are the most vocal about how this country should be run are the people who are living in their mom's basements. And it's not married, they don't have kids, they landed some high profile public speaking thing, but they're the most impassioned people. And it's have you ever run a business? You've never run a business. Have you ever? The way to the city. And here he is telling us all how to live. And it's brilliant. I love this passage right here, because I feel it's forward and just going to America. Whap! I love it. Let me, verse 16.
All right. Woe to the land whose king was a servant, and whose princes feast in the morning.
Mine says whose king is a child.
It's King James.
Yeah,
As a child, yeah. Would
same.
you say servant?
Yeah. Script that says at the bottom, like working as a child. I find it interesting that a lot of wars in English history that happen, like throne, and then they
Every good.
Voted for Trump, you know, what's the choice? But some of the arrogance does concern me. I've said that with, I'm a president, right? And I don't want to get political with it, but world and what they're trying to do and what they're doing. Like we're sharing.
And he wrote the most beautiful letter. Moment of it was filled with grace, but already at that moment in American history, the fighting started the second we had the country. And these are people, you know what I mean? Like where they, as a conflict with that. So this is an etching. I mean, you see the figures on the ground and the horrors of the French Revolution. But if you read about the French Revolution, is right before everything exploded. The rulers of, I'm just going to do like a cheesy fast forward history. All the rulers in France were called to all go to Versailles. And they all went there and they just got a lot of wine, they got a lot of food, and they just partied. That's all, like, so well, every principality, everyone was summoned there. And the king thought that was centralizing control, because if they weren't there to rule over their kingdoms and they were in his domain, then he could consolidate power. They were drunk out of their minds. They were doing all sorts of bad things, you know, sexually immoral things, and it was just this decadence. And while that was taking place, what was happening? The people were starving. The people were absolutely suffering. And so they were just hoarding to themselves. It says right here, and your princes feast in the morning. King's a little bit, but there's a portrait and he's like this, and he's wearing white tights. And he was very proud of how beautiful, he actually wrote like in letters and stuff, like how he's so proud of his beautiful legs. And so he has a portrait and he's like this with white tights. And it's just like, you look at it, it's like, oh, like so cringe. And yet, so the king was a child and they were feasting in the morning. What happens with that? Well, the people hit a breaking point. And the breaking point was the storming of the Bastille. I think it was 1789. And they went, they stormed the Bastille and they took out the military. Probably the rulers were like, oh, that was bad, but let's move on. 1793 happens, the reign of terror. And then you have these revolutionaries and they get in control. And what do? Did they chop off the 300 heads of the noblemen of this? No. They chopped off 300 heads, 600 heads, 1,000 heads, 10,000 heads, 14,000, on and on and on until the number got up. I think it got up to like 40,000 people. And they guillotined them right in the middle of the square. And at the end, there was no reason for why people were getting guillotined. They weren't the rich rulers. It was just people. They're like, oh, didn't you deliver milk to that? Like, you're dead. The law and order was wiped out and anarchy set in. And it wasn't like, they still have the Bastille Day in France. And I think to myself, I don't really think you guys should have the Bastille Day. I don't think it was the greatest moment. Like the American Revolution, it was a country that had gone through the First Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening. They called on God. We had this revolution that was so beautiful and so powerful, and I'm not idealistic, I know my history, and they turned to God, and then when they had won their revolution, they said, God, we turn to you in supplication. Please show us how to design this thing. And America's not perfect, I'm not saying that at all, but you have the princes feasting in the morning. And I'm going to go forward to another image. It's a difficult image to look at. Yeonmi Park fled from North Korea, and she wrote her biography. It's the most brutal biography. I've never read a biography before in my life. It's her autobiography. I've never read a biography before in my life and wept. I was reading her autobiography a couple of years ago. I was crying because of the heartache in North Korea. And then to get out of North Korea, she had to go to China, and then how the Chinese treat the North Korean woman. I can't even describe it here. And then finally she gets over here and then she meets American missionaries, and somehow or other, long story short, she makes her way to the United States. Yeonmi Park said the hardest thing about what went on in North Korea, they would go into the woods and they would eat grass, they'd eat the bark off the trees because everyone was starving. If you found a grasshopper, it was like eating a steak. So the hardest thing for her was when she found out that the rulers of North Korea, they were feasting in the morning. They drank bottles of Johnny Walker Blue. And I had to look up what Johnny Walker Blue was because I don't know. Those bottles cost $600 per bottle. These men were drinking $600 bottles of Johnny Walker Blue while those kids right there were starving to death. Rulers, when they feast in the morning, and it's like, I know, But you also might have something coming to you on this side of eternity, because you can only push a people so far. And now let's flip it. Let's go to verse 17 so that we don't just start crying. So someone want to read verse 17 and just 17 actually.
Sure. Blessed is the land whose king is of noble birth, and whose princes eat at a proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. 17 is what?
Yeah, 17, just 17.
Oh.
So we see right here, if anyone has anything, jump in.
It's interesting that he thinks that there is something to noble birth. Perhaps I'm reading it wrong.
Sure.
But there is something like that, there is a nobleness to like that line of like English monarchs
Yeah.
that separates them from like every other normal person.
Yeah. And Evan, your point is really good. If we jump back to chapter 9, verses 13, you don't need to turn there, but chapter 9, verses 13 through 15, I'll read it quickly. I've seen this example of wisdom under the sun. It seemed great to me. There was a little city with a few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it, building great siege works against it. But there was found in it a poor, wise man, and he, by his wisdom, delivered the city. So just pausing at that right there, there are noble, individuals. But what the author says is sometimes there's the noble born, and then there are the wise. And he knows, we think this is most definitely Solomon. I mean, it's not certainly Solomon, but he knows that David tended, just the sheep for his father, and yet he was noble, and he was anointed by God. And so, yes, he's referring to there is the noble spirit, but it's really the one who's wise. You know what I mean? So it's a really good point. So happy are you, O land, where your king is the son of the nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. So turn back with me. It's just probably going to be like 5 or 6 pages for you. And does someone want to read Proverbs chapter 31, verses 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So Proverbs 31, 4 through 9.
You said 4 to 9?
Yeah, Proverbs 31, verses 4 through 9.
It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law, and pervert the justice of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to those who are bitter of heart. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his misery no more.
Yeah, and if you also 8 and 9.
Oh. Open your mouth for the speechless, in the cause of all who are appointed to die. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and the needy.
So the author is saying here, it's so powerful. He's saying, you've been given this position of power. Are you just going to spend all the potential energy that you have there, just going to spend it on just escapism and your own hedonistic pleasures? You have the opportunity to open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. The urging that the author of, it says the words of King Lemuel, the urging of the author is one of you have a chance. You can make a difference. The ball's in your court. And I look at this, and I actually, this is the Kevin's spin on it, but I think, it's going to sound arrogant, but in a way if you're born in the United States right now, and you're living in a place like Long Island, you're almost a king. There are entire nations where who goes out something like $2 a day, and here you are, you have this chance, are you just gonna drain into oblivion? Open your mouth for the mute. You only have 2 choices: self-indulgence or hearing the chorus. If someone can quote verses very well. Years. Like, you have a choice. I almost feel like this is written for us. Like, not just Americans, but I'm just saying, like, it applies. Open your mouth, judge righteously. So jumping back to Ecclesiastes. Happy are you, O land, when your king is a son of the nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time. It's 5 o'clock for strength, not for drunkenness. Perhaps they had, wine at that meal. It's not saying that they didn't have any wine, but what they're saying is the purpose of the meal was for fortitude, so that they could go out and execute their tasks. It's just like, I love this. It's just, the way he wraps this all up is so beautiful. So does someone want to read verse 18?
Sure. Through laziness, the rafters sag. Because of idle hands, the house leaks.
Yeah, and if anybody sees anything there, jump in.
So, what were the...
Oh. Like at this point in time, I don't know. I mean, we know that they had to take apart the roof to lower the leper, but that was 1,000 years later. And at this point in time, maybe things didn't change much, but the roof's sinking in seems to imply that there would have been wood going across that wasn't maintained properly. Is that what you're wondering?
I suppose I was just curious.
Yeah.
I was born in a house with a thatched roof. It didn't leak.
Oh, wow. The house is
Yeah,
thatched?
more, yes.
Wow.
Thatched, yeah.
Wow. That's so wild.
Didn't leak.
I didn't know that, because when I went and visited the house, it had I don't even know what it had.
It's all kind of caved in now, though.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I'm saying.
Yeah, that's wild. Through sloth, the roof sinks in, and through indolence, the house leaks. Again, so we've been hearing a lot about the ruler, the wicked ruler, the righteous ruler, the foolish ruler, the wise ruler. And then it says, through sloth, the roof sinks in, and through indolence, the house leaks. The metaphor is so straight. It's saying when you have an incompetent ruler who hires all of his friends and puts the wrong people in positions of power, and the right people are sidelined and they can't advance in their careers, when this person is fickle, they're getting drunk early in the morning, the roof is going to sink in. The nation itself is going to start collapsing. The ports are going to silt up, and the ships won't be able to get into the harbors anymore. He's saying industry is going to collapse, infrastructure, you're going to lose your nation. This whole thing is going to start collapsing in, and we've seen that with incompetent, pathetic rulers. And to make sure that we don't stay just out quickly, all the promises of the Soviet leaders, we're going to usher you in to the new utopia. Everything is going to be so fantastic. And if you ever heard the joke, a lot of Ronald Reagan talked tonight. Ronald Reagan told the joke that a husband and wife, they went to the car dealership because everyone in the Soviet Union got a free car. And so they went to the car dealership, and it took something like 7 years, maybe it was even longer, for you to get your car. You had to wait 7 years, but you got your free car. And so they're sitting down at the car dealership, and the dealer says, okay, so we're going to be coming in June of such and such, 1963. And then the wife turns to the husband, she goes, oh no, we can't have the car delivered on that day. And he's like, why not? And she goes, well, the pipe broke in the basement, it's gushing out water, and that's the day that the plumber's coming. But again, it's this whole idea of these rulers who promise utopia, and then the whole nation is falling apart. Nothing worked in the Soviet Union. And we're very close with a woman who's from Poland and who lived through the occupation. And she said they couldn't even get toilet paper to the cities. Yeah.
Yeah, my husband went a few times,
Yeah.
to Russia. And pastors came over, and then a few people, his translators, they moved here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 2 of them, translators from. So I know how it was. He had to bring his own toilet.
Yeah, yeah. It's just they couldn't even deliver on that. The roof is sinking in. Everything's falling apart. And that's another thing about the Soviet leaders. Jack Barsky, who I had the privilege to meet here at the studio, he said the opulent decadence at the top of the Communist Party, these like soirees empire, except it was the Soviet Union. People were 1 million dead Ukrainians, from the famine the forced famine that they had, and then the rulers were off all getting drunk early in the morning in the Soviet, in the Kremlin. It's like, not bringing Russia and Ukraine for any reason. My point is that the roof sinks in. It doesn't matter how excellent your plans are. So let's jump forward to, someone want to read verse 19 and 20?
A feast is made for laughter, wine makes life merry, and money is the answer for everything. Do not revile the king even in your thoughts, or curse the rich in your bedroom, because a bird in the sky may carry your words, and a bird on the wing may report what you say.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that we're a couple minutes after, so I'll make this really quick. I think he's being very ironic in verse 19. I don't think it's an admonition for you to just enjoy bread. Like, I actually think what he's saying is, it's kind of like, the bread and, what do they call it? The bread and theater or something like that. But it's this whole ironic thing of these rulers, they're corrupt, this and that. They're going to gorge themselves with bread. They're going to get drunk on wine, and a corrupt handing a few dollars underneath the table answers everything. And my pastor has done a lot in Ukraine. He's been there for 30-something years, helped to build a huge orphanage. You can't call it an orphanage, but it functions as an orphanage. And the reason everyone everywhere was corrupt. Everyone was getting a bribe under the table. The only person I trust is my pastor friend in Ukraine and his wife. And they know their church and they know their body, but money answered everything, because all they had for decades was a black market. And so you can't even bring medical supplies over, because you bring it to the hospital and it's the next morning. Somebody will trade it for a bribe. Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king. So here you are, you have a fickle ruler. He's given to like outbursts and stuff like that. You lay low. And then he says, also there's wisdom to keeping your mouth shut and not speaking in such a way that is impetuous, like where you just let your mouth like rattle off. I don't think there's wisdom in that at all. God wants us to be careful and calculated. If we're gonna get in trouble, to be deliberate about it, to let our, go before the ruler with wisdom. But again, I see we're 5 minutes over. I never like to go over, so sorry about that. Does someone want to close this out with a word of prayer? I'll close this. Lord, I thank you so much for just this group that you've gathered here tonight, Lord, and us would live in an age of many words being spoken every minute, podcasts, social media, TV stations. Lord, your word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path, Lord, and we hide your words in our heart that we might not sin against you. Be with us this week, and let the seeds of these words just go deep into the soil of our soul, Lord, that we could grow and our spirit could just blossom, Lord. All these things, Lord, we pray in your name, Jesus. Amen. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go hit the button. I'll be right back. Good to see you, John.
Good job. I'm willing to finish this thing. It'll be like 3 months.
I'll be right over. I'm going to hit the button here. I'm just going to hit the button to turn the program off.